We've got a heat wave blistering across the country, storms racing across the U.S. as well, and action getting ready to heat up in the WNBA. The All-Star break has come and gone. And so today it is Monday Musings. We dive into all of it right here on Locked On Women's Basketball.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, friends. It is July 21st, 2025. We have hit the middle of July. It is blazing hot in so many parts of the country today, including mine here in the Midwest, where we've also got storms that are racing across the country. Stay safe and be well. And if you were like me, you got to get out of the heat. You stay inside. And so yet another major victory over the weekend for one of my favorite golfers, Scottie Scheffler. Big time win across the pond. Hi, everybody. Missy Heidrick, and welcome to Locked On Women's Basketball. Thank you for making us your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA, all uppercase, at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Well, we know that it has been one of those times of the year where all things kind of seem to come together. Not as many sports on your television. You're watching baseball. We had the Major League Baseball All-Star break last week and early. Then we were headed towards the WNBA All-Star break over the weekend. College campuses starting to get a little quiet, but yet starting to fill up, because we know that just around the corner when it comes to August, campuses will be buzzing and college sports will be back on our radar, even though they always are. But today we've got to dive in, talk about what's been happening in the W, what we saw over the weekend, what were the big takeaways and the headlines, things you need to know, and then a few topics that are going to be on the cusp and a part of the buzz of the second half of the 2025 WNBA season. Well, let's go back a couple days and revisit what happened in Indianapolis over the weekend. And it was the 2025 All-Star break. Started with great festivities. And if you're out there and you've been on social media, you've seen all of the buzz, a ton of great publicity. And I think this just continues to add to what we know about what's been happening with the W, a continued elevation of this league, of the stars, of the players, and what it means to the overall growth of women's basketball as a whole. Hats off to Indianapolis. From everything we've heard, they did a great job of hosting this year's All-Star game and festivities. And we know big stars in Indiana, and that draws big crowds. Well, it all started with the Friday skills competition. We have to start with one of the biggest pieces of the news, that Caitlin Clark was not going to participate in All-Star festivities. She was set to be part of the three-point competition on Friday night, and then it was Team Clark she was going to be able to play. Not able to participate, held out because of that ongoing groin injury, and we will talk about that a little bit later. But the Friday skills competition with some different faces, but yet brought all of, I think, the drama and really great exposure and display of what makes this league so good. Sabrina Ionescu of the New York Liberty, the three-point champion. You had a rookie that was in the three-point contest, and Sonia Citron. Ionescu beat Alicia Gray in the final round to take that. And it was a New York sweep because it was also a win for the New York Liberty as they prevailed with Natasha Cloud prevailing in the skills competition. She was over Alicia Gray, Skylar Diggins, Erica Wheeler, Gabby Williams of Minnesota. Great display of people and to be able to showcase what they have. But when push came to sub, Serena Ionescu, she lit it up in the three-point competition. And hats off to her, because I think she did a great job of reaching out and kind of giving that piece to Sonia Citron, the only rookie to participate in the contest. I'm sure she was nervous, but she is continuing to show herself as why she is one of the best in this league. So hats off to that. Wonderful competition, great camaraderie, and it was showcased on Friday during the skills competition. Then you move to Saturday and what was going to be the All-Star game, Team Clark versus Team Collier. Caitlin Clark and Nafisa Collier, they were going to be the captains of these two teams. Then you've got the picks and you've got the players. When it was all said and done, It was a 153 to 131 win for Team Clark. It was really devoid of a lot of defense, but there was a lot of offense. And it was also by the MVP. Not only was she a captain, but Nafisa Collier, the MVP of this year's WNBA All-Star game. She caps it off with 36 points. And while there was no Caitlin Clark on the floor for her team, they were able to score 151. But the 151 that was broke, it passes the mark. And give credit, because I just think it was such a great win and a great display for Team Collier as they are able to win that 151 to 131. Little defense played, as we said, but that's what you're going to see in most all-star games like this. There were some replacements that were able to step into key spots. Kelsey Mitchell of the Indiana Fever, Jackie Young of the Las Vegas Aces stepped in to take over spaces. There were a couple new rules that people saw. There was the 4-point shot. There was also a 20-second shot clock instead of the normal 24. They had a differentiation of how they were going to do substitutions kind of during live play. Gives it all a little bit of different feel, more fun, more activity, great for the fans. And as we said, a huge point total, and that surpasses the previous point total, the 282, the previous point total that was set 270 back in 2023. But a fantastic display. And I think just as we continue to see not only the big names, but those that continue to assert themselves in different ways. A player like Nafisa Collier, who not only is a captain for a team, but then she is the MVP. She scores 36 points. Really one of those undeniable performances and people that step up. We've seen it in the NBA All-Star games. We saw it in the home run derby just last weekend in the major leagues. It's all part of the phenomenon that we see in professional sports. And I just think that Nafisa Collier, even though sometimes under the radar, one of the biggest stars in this league. And you see it not only because of the success that Minnesota has, but just the way she carries herself. I think how she has positioned herself in a leadership position with Unrivaled, as well as with some of the negotiations that are taking place with the collective bargaining agreement. Being a leader in this league, that's what you have to have. Players have to put themselves forward in multitude of ways. And I'm a huge Nafisa Collier fan. One of the main reasons why their team has been so good. And I think while this all-star game had such great success. Now, we mentioned no Caitlin Clark. And as we kind of navigate towards the second half of this season, which is going to begin tomorrow on Tuesday, July 22nd, the regular season will end on September 11th. There'll be 4 games played on the 11th. So you've got time here now, ladies and gentlemen, to pick your team, to see where these horses are going to go in this race, because there are going to be teams that are vying for the playoffs that will begin in mid-September. But without Caitlin Clark, she is still unlikely. And another big news piece for all of you to take away on this Monday. She's unlikely to play tomorrow against the New York Liberty, still being evaluated for that groin injury. Again, we said they held her out during the All-Star game. And I think there was abundance of caution and a fantastic move, not only by her, but by the Indiana Fever leadership and by everyone involved in this league. But she was still there. She was engaged. She was part of everything, and give credit to that, because sometimes it's difficult when you can't be in a position to be able to participate, but yet to put on a happy face and to do that. But I think it's also a very different feel than just being on the bench in a regular season game. An all-star experience is one that is supposed to be of enjoyment and fun and camaraderie. And that's exactly what you saw out of all of these WNBA players over the course of the weekend. I think they did a great job of showcasing the league, and give credit to those, especially like someone like Caitlin Clark, not able to participate, but doing her part and still there as a captain, even though her team did not win. Now, one of the other big news pieces that came out of this past weekend with the All-Star game has to be the continuing discussions about the collective bargaining agreement and what happens next in this league. We're going to talk about that when we come back in just a moment. Well, have you ever wish manage your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete fiscal command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you can also build personal wealth. Sometimes it's surprising what happens when you can go ahead and track all of your expenses every month with Monarch. It lays it all out there. It gives you something. Is there a specific category that maybe you've been thinking about where you want to cut back or make changes? That can all be added, and it's an unexpected information that you're going to get at your fingertips with Monarch Money. What if you also are sharing your finances with a significant other or partner? They will help you all stay on the same page. It is a really big piece of what they can offer for you. So can take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA, all uppercase, at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. Hi, everybody. Missy Heidrick, and welcome back to Locked On Women's Basketball. We're recapping all of the greatness of the All-Star Weekend, which was just filled with fantastic display of talent, camaraderie, skill, and a lot of fun and great content out there on social media. Go give it a check. And I also want to tell everybody, get yourself over to our newsroom at The Next, www.thenexthoops.com. Covered start to finish, all information you need about the All-Star Weekend, as well as what lies ahead each and every day in the W as this season progresses. As we said, the second half of the season starts tomorrow, Tuesday, July 22nd, runs through the middle of September, and then we will be smack into the playoffs. Who's going to be vying? Who's got a chance? Well, that's all the information you're going to find in our newsroom and at your fingertips each and every day at The Next. Well, one of the other big pieces that came out of the came out of the All-Star Weekend was a collective bargaining agreement meeting with the Players Association and the WNBA leadership. This is an ongoing process, and we all know has been part of this simply because with the cancellation of the last CBA, it's kind of put things out there now to come to a conclusion. We know that you have both the players who are talking about things like salaries, revenue sharing with owners, draft eligibility, making sure there's a softer salary cap, fixing in some of those necessary things for the players like charter flights, maternity leave, all of that has been part of what the players have been fighting for and talking about for many years. The ownership and the league, they have to prioritize certain things as well. They want to talk about prioritization in terms of where players play, trying to keep players from going overseas or international players, making sure that the WNBA's schedule is top on their list. They want a yearly draft. They want to think about that hard salary cap. Player designation is going to be interesting. It's going to be, I think, a piece that is a big part of what this ownership group wants to do. But more than 40 WNBA players gathered, including the likes of Caitlin Clark, Paige Beckers, Angel Reese, the leadership of the Players Association. They met for a meeting with the league to discuss the ongoing next negotiations for this collective bargaining agreement. And when you do that, it really marked, I think, the largest in-person talks that they've had about the CBA, and that has been reported by multiple outlets since the All-Star break. And I think that speaks volumes to the thought that these players know that they need to be in the same room, that they have to have one united voice, that a lot of the conversations that are being talked about right now is really what they have to put onto paper, and they've got to come to a conclusion. But this is the first in-person meeting that these two parties have had probably since the month of December. Now, there were a couple statements that would put out, and I will give you a quote from the Players Association. Quote, the WNBA's response to our proposal fails to address the priorities we've voiced from the day we opted out. A transformational CBA that delivers our rightful share of the business we built, improves working conditions, and ensures the success we create lifts both today's players and the generation to follow, end quote. That was from the WNBA Players Association in a statement after the meeting. the league, and they understand that there's a lot of different factors to this, ladies and gentlemen. I think that there is some scenarios in which the W is looking that they have to address. Number one, we have 2 new franchises that will be coming on board next year. Then you're looking at expansion moving after that with 3 more. That means that all of those organizations have paid in. They have created a franchise fee. Where do those dollars go? That number's gone up. The Valkyries and Golden State, $50 million. The 3 new teams that will come on board later in the next few years, $250 million for a franchise fee. Well, obviously, the value with all of the different factors continues to rise. That's the question from the Players Association. Where does that come back in the idea of revenue sharing with ownership? Now, you're going to add more franchises, more team scenarios. The WNBA is going to want to think about, as a organization, more games, longer schedule. We have to have more. Well, that's something that's going to have to be factored in as well. I think there's also an idea that they really want to focus on that centralization and being able to get, as we said, prioritization, and I use it as centralization, be able to get players to stay and play in the W, whether that's going overseas in a Eurobasket scenario, whether it's something like Unrivaled or AU Pro, limiting some of that possibly, but maybe finding a happy medium and a partnership that can only continue to grow the game. That can be a positive as well. I think a lot of this comes back to the idea that you have dialogue. The dialogue has to continue to be positive. The WNBA's new $2.2 billion media rights deal, it starts next season. And then you're expanding to the 18 teams, as we said, by 2030, by the end of this decade. So the question is, how does that expansion, is it reflected in the revenue shares that are going to be shared? Can we start talking about increased salary caps? Can you think about that long term, not only for the players that are here, but in the future? One of the things that I think absolutely needs to be addressed in this collective bargaining agreement is roster sizes, the protection of players and then limiting that roster. Understandable if a franchise or a team decides in their front office, well, we could carry 11, but we could carry 12. We only want to carry 11, which means I've got more money to go around with my current players, but I lose someone on a designated that takes up a roster spot. Case in point, happened to the Seattle Storm this year. I think that has to be something that has to be addressed. Yes, you're looking at expansion. There's going to be more opportunities and more chances for players to make rosters. But this is incremental. We're sitting in 2025. The expansion of this league goes all the way to 2030. What happens after next year's draft? Where do those players go? Undraftable players or players that are drafted that don't have a spot, that are the top talent in the collegiate game, they need to be on WNBA rosters. That's the next generation. So for the collective bargaining agreement to start talking about not only protecting and thinking about today, but the future, rosters have to be engaged. I think a couple things to take out of this more real quickly as we just sort of think about what this collective bargaining agreement is going to look like. That when the union opted out last fall, they knew that there needed, and if a new one is to be put in place by October, there's a lot of things that have to come into play with this. There's going to be a lot of continued discussion. I think it's a positive that they had this in-person meeting with 40 plus players, current players, young and old, leaders, new voices, rookies. They are all have to be engaged. This is all part of what they do now with this league. But I think the W as a whole, as the organization at the top, Kathy Engelbert and their leadership, they're going to have to come back and say, we've got to take our owners, we got to have a discussion about what we want to do next, because a work stoppage may not necessarily be the best thing. Momentum is on your side. You don't want a situation where then you're talking about free agency or expansion drafts or anything like that that impacts it with a stoppage. There is going to be a point in time here over the next month and a half to 2 months where they are going to have to get into the trenches of the nitty-gritty and get a collective bargaining agreement done. Both sides have to listen. I think they both have valid scenarios. They can meet in the middle and find the right thing, because expansion is happening. This league is growing. Media rights are coming in. You've got to figure out the best way to position that to continue the growth and to continue to elevate professional basketball on the women's side in the United States. All right, we are coming up on the second half of the WNBA season. It starts tomorrow, July 22nd, a Tuesday of all days, hot and heavy all the way across the country. But the one thing that has been a topic of conversation, I want to give you a few thoughts and dive into a little bit, has been this idea and this ever-evolving consternation around officiating. We'll dive into that in just a moment. Hi, everybody. Missy Heidrick. Welcome back to Locked On Women's Basketball. Thank you for joining us here today. So much is happening. The All-Star weekend has wrapped up. Teams are back out on the road. Play begins for the second half of the regular season tomorrow, July 22nd on a Tuesday. If you're curious, it is a logjam. The Minnesota Lynx 20-4 lead this league. The Liberty 15-6. Phoenix 15-7, Seattle 14-9, Atlanta Dream 13-9, and the Minnesota Lynx 12-0 at home. They are the team to chase. We mentioned Nafisa Collier at the top at her outstanding performance as the MVP of the All-Star game, also captain of Team Collier. They win 151-131 in the WNBA All-Star game. But I think that Lynx team, they are the one that everyone has to circle on their schedule. How can you knock them off? How can you beat them? To be determined. Can the Fever get healthy? They're in the playoff hunt. They've done it without Caitlin Clark. They sit at 12-11 as they head into the second half of the season. When will she be available? To be determined. You want all of that information. Stay up to date all day, every day. You know where to find it. It's going to be over at thenexthoops.com. Well, one of the other big kind of topics of conversation that's been happening around the WNBA over the last few weeks has been one around officiating. And I think as this league reached the All-Star break, it seems as though everyone could maybe take a breath. But I'm going to talk a little bit and give you some ideas and just a little bit of maybe concept around this, because you're hearing from players, you're hearing it from coaches. Every so often, someone is good at a director of officiating is going to be able to give their 2 cents. That ultimately there's been a frustration as the season has started in the league about finding a greater consistency in how games are officiated and the level of physicality that is allowed. Well, I'm going to tell you, the evolution of this league and the evolution of these players is very simple. They're bigger, they're faster, they are stronger. And with that said, you have to be able to adapt how games are officiated. Finding that consistency factor, it doesn't have to be a game that is consumed by a whistle, but it has to be consistently done. Ask any coach, ask any player. They will tell you consistency matters. I've said it all along. As a player myself in the college game, as I sit now as an analyst in the college game, one of the things I always look for is that consistency. Is the game being called the same way on both ends? Is the pushing and shoving in the lane or the hand checking out front or how someone is going to guard a screen and roll at the top of the key with the physical nature, with a bump or a hand check or a push, is that being called the same way on both ends with both teams? If it is, you've got no problem. Consistency is the way to go. That right there, I think, has been one of the biggest factors that has been difficult for coaches and for players to find, that they just haven't seen the consistency that they would really like over that. It happened again last week. There was an instance within a game and with the Fever and the Connecticut Sun, Caitlin Clark, she took a tough inbounds pass. She stopped. There was a review. There was a discussion with Michael Price, one of the officials. She was upset. All of this kind of continues to go, but it was just one of many moments throughout the season where there has been a lot of consternation between players and officials on the floor. I think one of the things you have to know, officials are going to hold themselves accountable. But again, they have to understand as the players are bigger, faster, stronger, the game moves faster. The game is more physical. And it's not just in the half court. It's 94 feet, and they have to be ready for that and understand it. I think an annual topic of discussion, it's always debated in every sport. We know that. One of the things I thought was very interesting, and I found this little bit of tidbit a statistical tidbit from ESPN research that foul calls are up slightly in the first half of the season, with teams averaging 18.7 fouls per game. And that is the highest since 2017. So while everyone is talking about this, we got to remember there's been times where no one really has cared, but we've got more people watching. There's more eyes on the game. There are more people tuning in. There are more people butts in the seats in the arenas. It becomes something that people are more aware of. Bigger, faster, stronger players, bigger, faster, more physical games. They have to be officiated consistently. That's what coaches are looking for. Now, we know whether it's the head coach for the Valkyries, whether it's Becky Hammon with the Las Vegas Aces, whether it's players that have used their post-game news conferences to air their grievances and frustration, it has happened in the first half of this season. What the second half will look like to be determined, I think one of those things to keep your eyes on, because it will impact how teams play, the physicality that you're going to see against some. I don't ever feel like it's a targeting scenario, but I feel like that they are going to want to be physical with certain players out on the perimeter or in the post. The officials have to be able to manage that. One other thing about this, and this has been something for me, especially kind of living and breathing in the college game for so many years, we have to be able to create a pipeline for officials. And it happens in the college game. You ask a lot of college coaches, they'll tell you off the record that, yeah, they are asking for the exact same things that Becky Hammon and everyone else in the WNBA is talking about: consistency, that you've got to be able to stay and keep up with the game. Sometimes it passes officials by. It happens all the time. We see it in college basketball at the men's level, and now we're seeing it in the women's basketball level as well. Let's remember, ladies and gentlemen, bigger, faster, stronger in the WNBA means bigger, faster, stronger in the college game as well. So you need a pipeline of officials, people that understand the game, that are able to be adaptable, to be able to get in the right spot, to keep up, and to be able to manage a game without it getting out of hand. Where does that pipeline happen? Well, I've always said that I think that, especially in the college game, go to former players right when they get done. Those aren't going to play professional, that they are going professional in something other than sports, just like those NCAA commercials tell us. That maybe that they are working as an accountant, or they are a teacher, or they're getting a master's degree. Maybe they want to get into the pipeline as a collegiate coach. Give them an opportunity, give them the tools, help them with that. That pipeline then only can help the professional ranks. We cannot rest on the fact that there has been a group of officials in the college and the professional games that have been handling this for years. It may have passed them by. With that said, the league itself at the W level has got to do a better job of making sure they fill that pipeline. And all of the leagues and conferences around the country in the college side, they've got to do that as well. The next generation of not only players on the floor, we need the next generation of officials on the floor to create that consistency in a game that people want to watch. Not one filled with whistles, not one filled with a ton of free throws that are being shot, and sure as heck, not one where we're going to see some sort of altercation or instigation every single night. That can be passed. That's not what's going to draw eyes. That's not what's going to keep people interested in women's basketball. The consistency is what we need. We need a pipeline and new people to be able to help with that officiating factor. My 2 cents, there's going to be calls. No one is ever going to be happy in a game, ladies and gentlemen, especially one that is going to be tightly whistled or it's down to a last couple possessions. It is going to be tense, and that is where coaches and players are on edge. And these WNBA officials, they have their hands full, just as the NBA folks do as well. But they do have a job, and their job is to be consistent and to manage the game. Bigger, faster, stronger, they've got to be able to keep up. All right, as we said, the next half of the WNBA season starts tomorrow, Tuesday, July 22nd, runs through the middle of September. There will be 4 games on the last day of the regular season on September 11th. Up till then, there is a race to get into the playoffs. Where are you going to find all of that information? Well, that's simple. You're going to find it here on Locked On Women's Basketball from myself and all of my amazing colleagues. And then you go to thenexthoops.com. 365 days a year, 24/7. We have you covered. So please continue to join us, continue to follow us, and see all of our amazing content. Well, you can find me at Missy Heidrick out on the socials. And then as I said, follow this podcast at Locked On WBB for all of your information and great news and great guests, because we've got you covered. Come back and see us, and we'll get caught up on everything for the next 5 to 6 days a week right here on Locked On Women's Basketball. Thank you for making it your first listen today. For your second listen, find the Locked On NBA podcast, where there is no off season. Happens for us too. Doug, Matt, and Hayes keep you up to date on contract negotiation, rumors, and everything you need to be the most informed NBA fan. Find Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Stay safe, stay cool in this heat wave, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today. We will see you next time right here on Locked On Women's Basketball.